Hey, what's up, guys? We want to welcome you to our podcast, and we are very excited today. We have a special guest with us, JT. You may know him as JT follows JC, and you can find him on TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube. So, welcome, bro. How you doing?
Hey guys, I
Hey,
appreciate you having me on.
yeah, no problem. Yeah, so how you been? How you doing?
Better than the last time. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure. Yeah, the last time we talked, I could barely like enunciate a word because I had a cold, but I'm doing much better now. Thank you.
Yeah, well, that's great. Hey, so we'll just jump right into it. So, for anyone who doesn't know who you are, you want to just tell us a little bit about who you are? How'd you get to the point to where you just started making content and just how you started getting into the research that you do?
Well, like I said, I'm 45 years old. I grew up in a Christian home, pretty much in suburbia, kind of like a just a just a normal every town USA. And my parents took me to church every Sunday. I went to Christian schools. I even graduated from Liberty University,
Wow.
and so I kind of like grew up as a believer, and I would say that I've always believed. I mean, I think everybody has their points of like, is this really true? I've been taught this way, but I I never really doubted for too long that Jesus was the way, the truth, and the life, and I believe that. But at the same time, when you grow up kind of in a Christian home, it's easy to kind of walk that lukewarm line because it's like go like I think going to Baptist schools, I always was just like presented with like these are the rules. You
Right.
don't do this, you don't do that, you don't do this, and when you do, we're going to punish you. And so like when you see Christianity from that point of view, you usually typically just try to like, well, how close can I get to the line and not get punished? And I think that I grew up with a lot of people like that, and it just it's almost like knowing what's true versus understanding what's true. And I just think as like a young person, I just had this narrow focus on what I thought life was supposed to be. Like you go as American, it's like obviously first you get you need to be a Christian. I believe I didn't want to go to hell, so like I
Right.
accepted Jesus, got baptized very young. But then as I got out of school, I thought, okay, so what do? You get a job, you get a wife, you get 2.5 kids, you get like the white picket fence, and then you have everything you want, and then it's like happily ever after, except for it sounds stupid saying that, obviously, because it is stupid. Because obviously, there's a lot of life, to live after that, and then what do you do? But I think once I got all the things that I thought I wanted or should have, it was almost like I had the idea of what it was supposed to look like, but have no idea what it was actually supposed to be like.
Right.
And when I got all those things, I started to almost get this anxiety about me of like, whoa, what if I lost some of these things? I got all the things I wanted, but it almost felt like life is like this. Just knowing as I was getting older, and you start to get like your health starts to break down a little bit. Like I was a little bit of an athlete in my 30s, doing like races and running and cycling and all those kind of things. And as I was getting injured, I was just like, well, I guess I can't do this forever. So what am I going to do forever? And then you obviously you have deaths in the family, and then you think like, is this the best it's ever going to be? That I had that thought in my head, and I think right around the 2020 election, I just was like, wow, like 2020, obviously the pandemic, all the things, and then I went through a divorce. Like I'm not of my own making. Like I never wanted that to happen,
That's
and so I
tough.
remember feeling like all the things I thought were stable in my life were just like completely unstable, and I really had to at that point like question what was true, what I believed, and basically I had to cry out to God, like, God, what if I lose all the things I'm worried about losing? I almost felt like I got that message from God, like, yeah, you might lose those things. You probably will. And what are you going to do if you do? And I thought, like, well, I guess as long as I'm good with you and I'm doing what's right, I haven't put you first in my life, so I'm going to try that. And if I can sleep well at night, knowing that I'm doing all I can for you, then that's good enough for me. And I did that, and I just like I gave God all the things I couldn't control, and then I just took care of the little things in front of me. Started to read my Bible again with fresh eyes, and God changed me. Like I never had that like that kind of real transformational change because I never thought I was that bad.
Yeah.
But only I know how I felt inside, and like
Right.
when I had that change where I really believed. I started reading my Bible with fresh eyes. I started to say everyone's lying to me except for God. I started reading my Bible like it is the truth. And and then after that, I started to try to cut certain things out of my life because I felt like a closeness with God that I never had before. And I felt like this. I really felt demonic attacks, especially at the very beginning of my journey.
Right.
And I started to question like, where did these things come from? Is this possibly something I invited into my house? Almost like the whole mythos of the vampire,
Right.
where like I can't come in unless you invite me in. You can invite me in. Well, I invited
Yeah.
probably a lot of those things in at times in my life, and looking back, I'm like, okay, so if I did do that, I need to figure out how it happened. And then when I learned a little bit about it, I felt compelled to start telling people about this kind of stuff. And yeah, before you know it, I got on TikTok. My brother invited me to check out TikTok, and I was just like, "What is this? Is like 13-year-old girls stuff?" Like I'm 40 years old, man. Like what do you
Right.
like? Why would I care about this? Until, like I said, I started to see some conspiracy stuff, some Illuminati stuff, and some some YouTube like stuff like the YouTube content I started
Yeah.
to consume at that point of like symbolism, like decoding things, and I couldn't get enough. So I was reading my Bible, I was I was going down the rabbit hole, and as I was learning things, eventually I made my first like TikTok, and like I had 3 followers. I think I got 10,000 views, and then I had 1,000 followers, and then I made a couple more, and then before you know, I had 20,000 followers, and then it was
Yeah.
like, and then it was like, the cool thing was like as I was waking up, I had certain people trying to like say, as I was mostly just doing like very just Bible based stuff. I was really like saying, I finally understand what the scriptures are saying. So I was explaining
Yeah.
them to people, and they're like, "Well, you really changed. You think you might go into the ministry?" And I was like, "Well, I mean, I'm getting divorced. So I was like, I don't really think I'm qualified to do anything like that. I don't really think I have a place in ministry." And then before you know it, it's like God did give me like this ministry that I said I had no idea. Like God provided a door, provided a way, opened a door that I didn't even know existed. And then before you know it, like you start doing this, and yeah, before you know, I'm doing like podcasts, making a movie,
Yeah.
and obviously doing this as much as I can because I just can't get enough of it. I love it.
Yeah. Yeah. That's awesome. I remember
Amen.
it was probably around 2021 or something. I remember seeing you, and this was before I was even content for the faith. I had this other little account, and that just got shadow banned, and I just bagged that one. It started fresh. But I remember seeing you. I'm like, who is this guy? And, because you were like real like excited about what you were talking about, and I think you were talking about the Book of Revelation, but I just remember like you're the OG TikToker, you know what I mean? But like I just remember also like how you said when I first started getting into it, I thought TikTok was just these little kids just dancing and these girls doing dances and stuff. But yeah, I mean it's I've learned a lot, met a lot of cool people on this platform. But so just kind of keeping it going. So um, you you have kind of changed your mind about a few things, and one of it being just cosmology. I know that probably a couple years ago, I went on a live with you, and we were kind of talking, and we were just chatting a little bit about you, and you just seemed a little resistant and stuff like that. And what do you think changed for you as far as just looking into these things that the church just has nothing to do with nowadays? They don't want to talk about it. So what made you kind of dig into it more?
Well, I think that, I mean, I guess like this should go without saying, but I think a lot of people, who don't know us, like it's funny, like you saying like, "Oh, I'm some OG." It's like I just started doing this. I might have started like a month before you, like, and and I guess it is. It's just like I think some of us are like we're all works in progress, right? Like, and I would
Right.
say I'm still at one of those. So like I said, obviously I get a little bit, you know, little bit anxiety when I hear people like are really hanging on every word I say, and it's like, listen, I am still, don't ever just trust me fully. Look back at what I say, and so
Yeah.
I felt like that God just. I mean, I feel like sometimes it's like the first bit of faith is just that first step, right? Because it's kind of like if God said, "I don't want you to go speak on TikTok until until you know everything." Well, you would never.
Right.
Obviously, we would. None of us would be on this app. You know,
Right.
we couldn't do
Yeah,
it. So it's like if you think about like even like Peter.
that's true.
Peter messed up a lot, and I think that's obviously why we love the Apostle Peter because we can obviously see ourselves. We can relate to that. It's like, but I think he was zealous in the right way, and I think some of us have been wrong, but for the right reasons and going out there. And I think that I felt like I wanted to start talking about the end times things. I think probably because I was seeing 2020 and I was seeing all the signs. And so that was kind of my main focus. And I think obviously I have like, we all come into the content creation with our backgrounds, right? So I like comic books. I watch the Marvel movies. I love, I've watched every movie almost. Like so I always have those references built in. So the first bit of content I was making was end times prophecy, and then I was doing like decoding like comic book movies and comics and that kind of stuff. So when I get presented with like flat Earth stuff, I'm like, first of all, I have people in my my who I know locally who are saying how stupid it all is, and so like you can't help but like be biased in that kind of way. And then I think I used to get frustrated because I was trying to talk about something else, and then somebody would be like, "What about the Earth? What about the ship? The Earth's flat. What about the dome?" And I'm just like, "Well, we're not talking about that right now." And
Hmm.
and so I think I did probably get resistant at first, and I think at one point I saw like a video that actually seemed like it debunked the flat Earth stuff, and I was just like, "Well, that's good enough for me. I don't have to look into this." Yeah, yeah. So they were like, "I'm dumb. I
Most
don't
people,
need to look
yeah,
into that now."
most people,
But then I think it wasn't until like I've kind of rested my my account and like obviously my life now that the Bible's true, and I'm going to judge everything else versus what the Bible says. And I think it wasn't until like I'm not sure who it was or if it was one of you guys
yeah,
or it was like just an account that said whether the Earth's flat or not, I'm not sure. But what I am sure is there's waters above because here's what it says right here. I started to think about that, and then people were saying, well, the Bible seems pretty clear that the sun goes around the earth, not vice versa. And so so obviously once you start to look into those things and then you do like research
yeah,
what it says about the firmament and the waters above, and then there's a million scriptures. I think there's 50 scriptures about the earth's not movable. And you're like, wait a minute, like, can I still believe what I did believe and say that I believe the Bible? And I think that's what it really came down to. It's like I said that I believed it, but do I believe it? And then
yeah,
I really had to decide who do I trust. And then I think I
yeah,
praise God, I decided, well, I'm gonna just trust what God says. And then the more I researched it, I think the thing that really kind of tipped it off for me was that being challenged in that sort of way, and then also like not believing in the moon landing before this, but then finding out like well, why do you believe that the Earth's a ball anyways? Well, because I got a picture of it. Here's the picture. Well, then you find out, wait a minute. Supposedly they took that picture on the way to the moon. So you're like, all right, that's tough. That's a tough one for me now because I don't think they went. And then you look it up and it's like, no, that's not actually a real picture. And then you're like, wait a minute, all the pictures are not real. So then you really
Yeah.
have to decide. It's like, okay, so if I only really believe because of
yeah,
the pictures, the video, I don't believe it anymore. Okay, well now it's just like it's easy one for me. It's like I'll just believe what the Bible says, and yeah, I would like to say that if you can give me credit for anything, not for being right all the time, but being willing to admit that I was wrong about certain things and being wrong and just because we care what's true. So like I think that's where I'd like to just stand at is that I might be wrong about some things I'm making videos about right now, but like I like to say that I'm not going to be too prideful to try to stick behind that wrong position in order to be right.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, because I've changed my mind a whole bunch of times, in the past, and it's a lot of people, they're really cemented in their beliefs, and honestly, I think that if you're that way, then how can you learn anything new? It seems like it's kind of like what you said. It's like a pride thing where you already think you know it all. If you're so cemented, where if people get presented this new information and like how you say they're just nah, kind of thing. So yeah, I mean, what was it you think? Because that's kind of what got me too with the scripture, and ultimately that's what sealed the deal for me. But what was something else besides the fake pictures and CGI that just kind of caught your attention, where people use this as an absolute proof, and then you saw something that was contrary to that?
I think there was. I remember one day it was. I was looking some stuff up, and I was trying to figure out how high they said the atmosphere went, and I there was no good answer for that. I was like, I saw like from what was like a couple thousand feet to what was it like six? It was like I can't remember. If it was like 200,000 kilometers or something like that. It was like, and it was all over the map of like how high it went. And I
Yeah.
thought, wait a minute, that doesn't sound very like. So how does? Because obviously, what most people would perceive based on what we know, like, or at least we've been told, there's this there's this little layer of atmosphere, and then you go pop, you get right out of it, and then all of a sudden it's floating.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
but then when they say actually the atmosphere is 200,000 kilometers long or something, I literally found a scientific article that said that the moon is inside our atmosphere, and I was like, wait a minute.
Yeah. I saw that
So I
recently too.
actually, in some ways, it actually kind of allowed me to believe both models a little bit, because I said, wait a minute. So what this is saying is what the Bible's saying is that these things are all inside whatever this is. So I said maybe people are just kind of talking past each other, and I think that that was when I was like really like that. I don't think that people really
Yeah.
know what they believe when they say they believe the heliocentric, spinning ball model.
Right.
Nobody has any idea what it says. I think people say, "Oh, well, the Earth spins,"
They don't.
but I don't think they realize that supposedly it spins 1,000 miles an hour, and then it spins around the sun at a 6.6 thousand miles an hour, and then the sun is going like 600 million miles an hour, and we're doing all this at the same time. And I think what it really kind of got me was somebody I saw a video about somebody talking about the constellations, and I think it was right around the time I was learning about the Mazzaroth, and I was learning about how like biblically like people think astrology is just the devil, the end, but it literally says, I think in Genesis 1:14, that God put the sun and the moon and the stars in the sky for signs first, seasons, and then days and nights. So I was like, okay, so if
Yeah.
God put these things in the sky, it's for us to see them. And if we were going that fast, they obviously would change.
Yeah.
Like that doesn't work. So I really almost thought like, wait a minute, if these constellations are there and they're fixed and they move, like, and obviously you can not can you set your watch by them, but you can. Obviously, that's what the sky is. It's like a clock, and it's like
Yeah.
if that's not showing us that this place is stable, all these other things are moving, and like again, I think I don't think there's any argument really against the Polaris. It's like when you find out there's a star that actually doesn't move; it just stays in the same place all the time, and all the other stars move around. And you're like, okay, so we like live in a planetarium, basically.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that to me, that was like,
Basically. Yeah.
all right, I don't think there's a scientific explanation that I could possibly buy that if they say all those things and that could appear the same way. I think that was kind of the end of it. And then so ever since then, like obviously the images of like zooming in from very far, you think something went over the horizon and actually no, it didn't. You just can't see that far. The horizon, like the horizon goes up to your perspective, meet your eyes.
Yeah.
Water does meet level. It's just those kind of things. It just it just kind of confirmed to me, like, yeah, they're just making stuff up.
Yeah. Yeah, their excuse for Polaris not ever moving is it's just far away. But then there's clusters and stars all around it that are millions, supposedly millions of times further away, and they move from horizon to horizon. So yeah, it's the worst.
Well, it's that's the thing. It's like I guess that's what people don't understand. It's like the I think there's what is it? I think it's the Dendera zodiac is like the oldest one we know of. It's from ancient Egypt, and it shows the constellations as they are. And it's like people don't get. It's like you could
Yeah,
still see the same stars. I mean, honestly, if you were spinning like we are, they'd
Exactly.
all look like streaks in the sky. Like they wouldn't even look still. You would like you ever see the time lapse? That's what it would look like because we'd be moving so fast. But they don't. But pointed this way, like obviously the Big Dipper, like if one's closer than the other one, you might actually look like they start to look
Yeah.
like they're getting closer to each other because
Right.
of perspective. And so our perspective is always the same, which
yeah,
makes you think, hey, if our perspective is always
Yeah.
that's because
At
we're
rest.
still
yeah,
just
Yeah.
like the Bible says.
Repeatedly. It doesn't just say that like once or twice. It's repeatedly. It's a consistent thing all throughout the Bible. It's on foundation. It's at rest. Yeah, and that's what we experience.
Well, you're saying like I said, the Dendera zodiac. I want to say that I think it's 4,000 years old. Okay, so you're
yeah,
telling me that they have not changed in 4,000 years? Oh, because they're
Yeah,
really far away. I mean, again, like that makes no sense.
yeah. You put millions of miles on something, and then everything just makes sense. Apparently,
Well, that is the scientific method. That's not scientific at all. Is to say blah blah blah, a million years, 60 million years, a billion years, and then everything seems plausible because I don't have to fill in all the gaps in like the gap that's
right,
is
right.
wider than you could
right.
even fathom. Because I think most people don't quite understand that they cannot grasp that much time, and then they don't realize the scientists can't grasp that much time, and also that's not science because science is supposed to be
Measurable. Yeah,
repeatable.
Yeah.
Like you can't repeat something that has obviously you
right.
can't do
Yeah.
that in a lab.
Yeah.
So I want to reel you back in for a second, but you said something about the Maseroth. What is that?
Well, the Mazzaroth is like I think I got a book. It was called The Mystery of the Mazzaroth by Tim Warner, which is funny because he's a ball earther and
Yeah.
he had like this book about the Mazzaroth. That being said, the Mazzaroth is like so. It mentions in the book of Job. It mentions the Pleiades. It mentions Orion's belt, I believe. It mentions a few of these kind of like the constellations. I think even Psalm 19 talks about that the day to day, the night to night, the basically the firmament, the sky pours out speech
Mm.
without giving any words. It's saying there's tents for the sun to rest in, and it's like it's very clear. Like once you understand the prophetic language that is literally talking about the zodiac, and again, so I think the difference is for most Christians, they would know that's satanic, the zodiac satanic, because they're the only knowledge they have about the zodiac
Right.
is
Yeah,
horoscopes. So it's kind of like you could use the Bible for idolatry if you're just, which probably lots of churches do, where you're picking out this one scripture just for me because this is supposed to lead my day. This one scripture that says I'm going to have fame and fortune in it. You know what I mean? Like that's what the zodiac, that's what the horoscopes are. It's like that I'm letting the stars dictate like how am I supposed to live my
Yeah.
life and the decisions I make. But at the end of the day, like the Bible, just like the stars in the sky, are pointing to Jesus. The story is about Jesus in the sky in your Bible, and so like what you need to do is try to understand your position in that you're very small. Like you can play a part in this, but this is not about you. It's always about the glory of God. And so the zodiacs actually literally point to Jesus. It's like I think they say like so Virgo. I'm one of those people who believe that Revelation 12 talks about the signs that were in the sky when the great signs in the heavens when Jesus was born was Virgo, and it was like so if you think about even like the Old Testament prophecy about the branch, the woman holding the branch, like that's literally what Virgo is. So it mentions all these signs that Jesus was born on September 11th, 3 BC, because I mean, literally, they can, again, the sky is a clock. You can actually go back and see when these things would have happened based on other historical data we have about when Jesus was born. And so, like, but what interesting enough, all these things have been promised throughout, and they all lead to it. I think it's even like Aries is the ram. You just think about the ram, like that when God was going to tell Abraham to
Right.
sacrifice Isaac, he provided a ram. Well, this is crazy. So when Jesus was crucified on the cross, the Bible mentions there was an eclipse at like 6 o'clock in the evening. Literally, when that happened, there would have been Aries would have been in the sky right behind him. Unless it would have been, it's like basically the sky would have went black just so Aries could have been exposed, like as Jesus being the
That'd have been
sacrifice.
a sight to see.
I mean, it's like, I mean, the whole thing is like, I guess you think about it like this, like these are the things that obviously the sky is, the stars are supposed to be there to tell you. And if you think about it, like, we talk about like planets, right? Wandering stars. Isn't it interesting how they're all named after these false gods? But the other stars, I mean, obviously the majority of the stars that did not fall are not fallen angels. Those ones are fixed, and they're telling a story about our God, the
Yeah.
King. And I think once you understand that, it's like, is it perhaps like, is that one of the reasons why people ask, well, why would they lie about
Right.
the shape of the earth? Why would they lie and say you should not research the zodiac at all? Because they don't want you to know these certain things. They all point back to intelligent design. They point back to a creator who took very good care
Yeah,
about telling us
I
about him.
agree.
Yeah. Yeah. I know you looked in a little bit of that too, Shane. Do you have anything else you'd like to add?
Yeah, I mean, he's right. What, from my understanding of the Mazzaroth, it's basically the Mazzaroth came first. The Zodiac came later. The Mazzaroth is the Hebrew version of the Zodiac, right? Um, and it basically is saying that the gospel of Jesus Christ is literally written in the stars. And there's a couple of good books on it. He mentioned a good one. It's unfortunate that the author is a Glober. That broke my heart.
It is weird. It is weird because it's funny when you see like this, like how the zodiac's supposed to work in the other model, and it's just like this doesn't make a lick of sense when they show the way the sun going around, or the Earth
Right.
going around the sun.
Right.
It doesn't make
Right.
any
Yeah.
sense at all.
None. And you mentioned something about the branch. I was just reading that in one of these books here. I want to try and find it real quick because I mean it just really relates to what we're talking about. Um, Give me just a second.
Yeah. Well, while you're finding that, so you had said something else about the wandering stars, which we call them planets, but I've talked to certain people too, and they get so hung up because what we've been shown this model. You got the sun, and then you got all the planets, and they're just lined up behind the sun, right? And they're rotating. But something that someone has told me before, but I could see Saturn in the sky. um, just because they can see it up there, they think, well, that means that we're a globe. You know what I mean? Like what?
Right. Well, I think that we don't like we perceive things like, well, I think without us being told this is a sphere, we see the luminaries in the sky and we assume they're spheres too, because that's what they tell us. And obviously when they're, let's just say they're edited, they're cleaned up, they make them look like they're cylindrical. I mean, they look like spheres the way that they're presented. They probably even put a little shine on it because it's like they probably even mess with the shadows to make it
Yeah.
look more
Right.
like a sphere. Like the truth is, as obviously like following people like David, when you I got a telescope at one point too. Like I think when I started got interest in the Mazzaroth, I got one of these, and sadly, where I come from, the stars are not all that good over here. It's like
Yeah.
light pollution or whatever, but like we can't see too many stars. But the funny thing, like getting your telescope, and I'm sure you can do this from any place probably in the world. Go look for the brightest star in the sky, and unfortunately, it's not what they tell
It's
you it is
Venus.
because it's Venus. So it's Venus is supposedly a planet, but it's way brighter than all the
Right.
other stars in the sky, even the real stars. And supposedly it's just reflecting the sun, which again does not make sense unless Venus is
Yeah.
literally like a mirror. Because it's made of mirrors because like it looks so bright, and then you look at Venus, you look at Mars, you look at some of these other the planets, and they dance like they're in water, and they don't look
Mhm.
like anything you've ever seen. They don't look like the pictures they've shown you. And so the real question is, why? Is it because my telescope's not that good, or is it because I don't have
Bingo.
Yeah,
Photoshop?
You don't have Photoshop.
yeah, and that was one of the things that got me when I would see stuff that Shane was posting and other people with the stars. When I first saw the first star I've ever seen that was just a live video, I was just thinking to myself, this like that was just one of those moments where you just had this revelation. You're like, yeah, we are. That's water. That's straight up water. You know what I mean? It's like a light in water, and I'm like, okay, I believe it.
Yeah, they'll try to
So,
blame that on the atmosphere turbulence,
hmm
like the air can be turbulent. But if the best thing I can compare it to, I remember when I was a kid, like when I go to the pool at nighttime and like go swim underwater and look up at the street lamp, it looks just like a star through a telescope. I mean, it would be, the same thing, the little rays that looks like it's spinning really fast, but it's not. It's just, the light shining through the water and all ripply and stuff. It's the same exact effect through a telescope. You can't tell me that's atmosphere
No, it was.
turbulence. I mean,
Well, I think that of course, the more I've looked into this stuff, I found like, okay, so if it was just the atmosphere, well, why are all the patterns different for every
exactly.
different
right.
every different star or different planet?
Yeah.
They all ripple differently. They're not the same. So like I had experience this past summer. I was like hanging out with my wife on the deck, and we were just like just relaxing after like kind of like a long day. And in the summertime, obviously the sun's up longer, and we have these pots like that have water in them. And I was just looking on like the eave of the house, and I just saw this light, and it was just twinkling, and I was like, and of course, now that after I'd had the telescope, I was like, that looks exactly the same. And so what was happening was that the sun was beaming down and hitting the water in this pot, and it was just shooting up, and it was just
Yeah.
dancing right on like on the
All
soffit
right.
of the house, like running
Yeah.
under the gutter, and it was so cool because that is exactly what it
Yeah.
looks. I mean, I'm not saying it's close. I'm saying that's
Exactly.
Exactly.
exactly what they look like through
Exactly.
telescope.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly what they look like. So it's like, so to me, it's like, again, I think this is what the problem is that a lot of Christians, who sit in the pews on Sundays, they are told not to believe what
Yes.
their eyes tell them. They're told not to believe what the Bible tells them. And so once you cite, it's funny, like it's like a lot of things with the Bible. It's like that. Let's just say you believe the Bible first. You'll start to see the evidence for the Bible being true all over the place. And I think that's the same thing where it's like once you're willing to accept, all right, I might get called crazy, I might get called stupid if I say I believe this, but then you see the
Definitely.
evidence
Right.
everywhere. And I think that that's kind of like that's probably like the whole idea of like that. I've really felt thankful. Like doing what I do. It was like in the book of John when Jesus heals the blind man. The guy was born blind, and it's like that's who we all are. That we
Yeah.
were all born blind
Yeah.
until Jesus gave us eyes to see. But you know what? You had to believe. So once you believed, then you could see. Like it's almost like your faith has made you
Right.
healed. So like now you can actually see the things that were
Yeah. I
that were
like that.
never hidden. I guess that's like the whole thing. Is like I love hashtag hidden in plain sight because everything is hidden in plain
Yeah.
sight to someone who's
hmm
blind.
Exactly.
But once you can see, it's like, wow. I mean, like you don't even realize the depths of like the like the just the things we could not see that were like right in front
Exactly.
of
It's
us all the
literally
time.
like the world totally changes. You literally see the whole world differently once you wake up to these
Yeah.
things. I mean, everything. When I went out on the on the lake with the boat this summer, my dad's got a boat, a pontoon, and we'll take it out, and the whole family will get together and we'll go out on the boat and just fish a little, mainly just ride around, cruise around on the lake and hang out. But there was it was it was sprinkling rain, but the sun was still out, like no clouds in the sky, but it was sprinkling rain. And I remember watching those little drops hitting the lake, and the sun, the way the sun was reflecting off of them, I swear it looked like twinkling stars, just stars twinkling.
Really?
Yeah, I was like, man, there's so many different ways water could play into the stars, and what we see.
Yeah, and that's real science. That's repeatable, like what you were saying
Yeah,
earlier. You could repeat stuff like
yeah.
that.
And then there's the reflection of the sunlight coming across the water. It comes straight at you. That is impossible on a ball or on a curved surface. You will not get light traveling in straight lines. Nothing does. No reflection will. It's distorted, like those mirrors on the school bus that are curved. You know how everything's distorted in them? Well, that's what it would look like when you're looking at the moon or the sunlight's reflection on the ocean or a large body of water. Everything would be distorted, but it's not. It's a perfect mirrored image. You only get that on a flat surface.
Well, well, isn't it also, David, that there's certain types of telescope that the way that was is it refracting versus what's the other kind of
There's
telescopes
two
that
there's two
it,
primary kinds, refracting and reflecting. But there's a lot of different types
mhm.
of reflecting telescopes. But the interesting thing about all of them, they all use curved lenses.
Right? So that would
Spherical.
make it appear that what you're seeing through the
And there's
telescope looks like a sphere.
Ha!
yeah, there's
Wow.
Right? Yeah, that's an aha
Yeah.
moment where you're like, okay, so that's why it
yeah.
looks
That's
like a
interesting.
sphere instead of just
That
just a
They
just
circle.
make some of these higher end telescopes, or you can buy a field flattener for your telescope. It's made to correct that. And when you look at some of these wandering stars, the planets with a field flattener on your telescope, they look like flat discs. They no longer, they don't look as spherical. And
Right. So I think that's one of those things where, like, again, that I learned that and I was like, huh. So why, so they clean up an image and still leave it
right.
distorted, right? You know what I mean? Like, so they Photoshop all the imperfections up, but
yeah,
they leave the distortion from the lens. Well, that seems convenient. And again, like when they go up to the International Space Station or wherever outer space is, and then they use like a GoPro lens
fisheye.
or whatever they use with the fisheye, and you're like, okay, so if it is curved, we'll put it this way: like you get two kinds of answers. It's too big to see the
Yeah,
curve, right? Right. It's either too big to see the curve, or yeah, obviously it's curved because look at this picture, and you're like, okay, so I would actually respect. I might actually be more likely to believe they say, oh, it's too big. It's too big to
yeah,
see the curve from this height. Okay, because I think that's what Neil deGrasse Tyson said. But instead, they show us obviously, very obviously, fisheye lens video and pictures from certain heights, and you're like, okay, so now if you take a look at the metal around the metal's bent,
Yes.
everything's curved. Okay, so like if you don't like obviously if you're dishonest in that kind of way, a dishonest by omission to say that you're not that you yeah this is a distorted image,
yeah.
well then you're a liar. Like, I mean, that's a lie by omission to say that. And again, it's like, to me, it's like, thou dost protest too much. Like, if you're trying to show a curve when there's not one, well, then I'm just
Yeah.
going to call you a liar
It's
because you're
that's
lying.
interesting because I've got a really good friend in the family, and he was telling me that we've all drank the Kool Aid. We're part of this flat Earth cult, and because he just knows it's a globe. And I'm like, well, how do you know it's a globe? Because I've flown in the airplane. I've seen it. I've seen it, Shane. I'm like, I'm like, whoa, whoa. Yeah, because
Oh,
we were
really?
texting about this for weeks, and I mean, he'd get mad about it, and it's got to the point now he won't even speak anymore. Good friend of the family won't talk to any of us because some of my family are flat earthers now too. But yeah, he said his proof was he has saw the curve from an airplane. He knows it's round. And but the funny thing is, the day before, I sent him a video of high altitude amateur balloon footage, 20 miles high, flat, perfectly flat. And you know what he told me? Oh, that's not high enough to see the curve. But then the next day,
What was
But
he
it's
flying
told
in?
me he saw it from only 5 miles up. Oh man,
wow,
yeah,
that's cognitive dissonance at its
yeah.
finest, right there.
They will lie to themselves.
Yeah, I was telling Ricardo today that I saw it was like someone on Facebook, and somebody was showing like I think it was the skyline of
Yeah,
Chicago from 50 miles away, and you could see basically the bottoms of the buildings. And then one of the top comments was this lady saying the flat Earth is a psyop. They want to see who's programmable, and I was kind of thinking like it could not be further from the truth because it's like obviously the program is
Yeah,
obviously
yeah,
everything they've taught us in school. So they've taught you think they taught you right in school and then just decided to throw this psyop out there so you could be tricked. Again, like it should go without saying that people who are flat earthers now believe the earth
right.
was once a ball,
Hmm.
a spinning ball. So like we had to be convinced, and it's like for the most part, there are no pats on the back to
no,
come out as a
No,
flat earther. I mean, it's like this is not, and this is one of the reasons why like people around me who I know probably have apprehensions, and these are the kind of people that get mad when you ask questions. Again, before I got to where I am, I just used to ask questions because
right,
that's what I do about everything. And once they started to get mad at me, I was kind of like, whoa, like I guess there's no answer then. I mean, like if you
right,
had an answer, you would not get upset because you'd calmly tell me the truth, and I'd be like, okay. Again, like I said, because I was ready to just say it's a ball. I can go back my business. I can go back to researching whatever else I was researching. But they got mad, and so like understanding like me, who's skeptical about everything, like I had to be really convinced, and I had to get to the point where I'm like, prove it to me. And it's not necessarily proving the flatness, but it's really like almost there's no
no,
proof for the
yeah,
ball. It's like there's you find out there's no proof for like the things that we're told about the ball part. And I think that like so when somebody says this is so somebody showing somebody who's programmable, it's like I know I'm the opposite of programmable because I question everything. I'm always like, where are you getting that from? Like, why does it like that? Why, what, all the questions. And and I think that's the thing. It's like that there's no people are telling me if you say the earth is flat, then they're not going to believe you. Your credibility is going to be questioned about
right,
everything else you say. And and I don't disagree with that. Like I do not disagree with that
yeah,
to the normies. The normies are going to say you
yeah,
probably think the earth's flat too. And it's like you and I'm probably thinking like you've
yeah.
never looked into it, have you? Because just like everything every other conspiracy we talk about, they're all crazy until you actually look it up and you're like,
yeah,
I
man, that
know.
wasn't even hard to find. And that was like, it's like you can tell people about Freedom of Information Act stuff, like literally, like it's like straight up government documents.
Nuh-uh.
No, and you're like, it's like literally, it's like I can show you where to look it up on like this .gov site that tells you what exactly what I'm telling you, and they'll still reject it. So it's like, so if that kind of person will reject anything else I say because I say what the Bible says and obviously what my eyeballs say. Well, I can't
Right.
control what they believe. You know, I'm not here to change everyone's mind.
Right.
I'm here to plant seeds, and I'm here to just and mostly I hope to just get people to ask the questions themselves and go look it
Yeah.
up. You know, like if you're willing to go look things up with an open mind, you know, not already knowing it all, you know, really realizing you really don't know a lot. I think once it means you realize you've been lied to and you start looking things up, you're like, you really start to think, what else they lied about? And I think it's
Hmm.
probably where most
definitely.
of us came to. We're like, they really lied
Yeah.
about the Earth.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it
they did.
blows your mind at first. Like I literally had a full on anxiety attack the day I became a flat earther. I mean, my heart was just pounding, and I couldn't believe it. My head was spinning. I'm like,
Yeah.
no way in the whole world. Like everybody fell for it. Everybody.
Hmm.
I couldn't believe it. I literally had one of those Neo moments, like from the Matrix, like literal, literal
He's gonna
awakening
pop.
moment. It was awesome. It was awesome. But
Hmm.
yeah, like what you said,
Yeah.
we people think they know everything, and the ones that think that, if you actually listen to them speak, they are the most ignorant. They're the dumbest, and that's why it's like what we were talking about the other night. They're old wineskins. They got no room for new wine. But even Isaac Newton, who was supposed to be, he was an astronomer, a brilliant mathematician, scientist, and I think he was a Christian by some of his quotes. He said it best: "What we know is a drop. What we don't know is an ocean." In comparison, we know a little
Yeah.
drop compared to an entire ocean. That's our knowledge. Really, it is.
Yeah, well, I think that that's like I think from the very beginning, growing up in Christian schools, and obviously rejecting
Yeah.
evolution, knowing that's a complete lie. That if God created us in His image, well, clearly He didn't start with an animal first. I mean, like that's downright blasphemous to say that He did. So knowing that I already questioned some of the science, and then when they started talking about big bangs, all the timelines, the dinosaur stuff, that's obviously
Hmm.
very sus. Like when you start to talk to somebody who's got an answer for everything and they're sure of it, like now you
Yeah.
smell BS because you're like because I know you can't know everything, and I think that's why I guess that's why I try to like when I make videos I try to ask questions, and I want people to ask their own questions because if I ever start being sure about things that I couldn't know for sure, well then you should
Yeah.
know
There
you
you
can't trust me. Like, and I think that's the problem with the science is like the that science is supposed to be trust me,
That's
bro.
what it
Like
Yeah.
is.
that's literally what it is. You
Trust me,
trust these,
bro.
trust me, bro. That's
Yeah.
my source. And like so, so if I question your source, now I'm a science denier. When it's like literally science is supposed to be about trying to prove the science wrong, being testable and repeatable. And it's like it really is. It's like that. I think certain people have. I don't think a lot of people are stupid. I think a lot of
At
people are
Yeah.
least.
willfully ignorant. We're all ignorant about the things we don't know, but we almost don't trust ourselves to be able to figure things out. When like science is basically about observation, so it's like, well, I'm observing a different phenomenon. Can you
Yeah.
explain to me your hypothesis a little
Exactly.
better? And when they get upset, you're like, all right, now I know that
Yeah.
you're lying to me, and that's how you know how a lot of people are lying to you. When it's kind of like a child, if your kid asks you a question about something and you can explain it to them, like you wouldn't ask them, even like I said, there pretty much is no dumb questions when it comes to like somebody doesn't know something they want to know. Like don't be afraid to ask questions, especially when they sound dumb. Because if you don't know it, you shouldn't go to bed not knowing it. And but like it really is when you question somebody who's telling you the truth, they don't mind explaining it to you. When you question somebody who's
Yeah.
lying to you,
Yeah.
they get
Yeah.
mad real
Yeah.
fast.
That's
Or if their belief is very
yeah.
insecure, that then they get upset because I think that's what people don't. I think that's what it really comes down to. These are heart issues where, like, the shape of the earth ultimately at the end of the day. I mean, how much does it really matter? I don't know. I mean,
Right.
obviously that's up for debate, but I guess the point is, it's like it's why we're clinging
Yeah.
to the view we are. I think that is really because it's like it's because you've decided to trust something, and I'm
Yeah.
questioning that source. And I think that's really the issue because if you question that source, then they have to start asking all the questions we've asked. What if they're lying about that? What if they're lying about other
Yeah.
things? Because then you know that they're lying about other things, and then you can't sleep at night, and then you have to actually decide who you can trust. I think that's what it always comes down to. And I think at the end of the day, if we found out one day, oh, well, but we get up to the great white throne, God says, yeah, actually, that was an allegory. It's really a spinning ball. And he'd be like, he would not be mad
Wow.
because you believed what he
Yeah.
said, like
Yeah.
what you thought he said. And I'm confident about that. Just like a child, like you wouldn't be mad at your son if he believed something you said that was kind of
Yeah.
sarcastic, but
Right.
he took it literal. you'd kind of be like, like that's. But you know what? If he questioned everything you said and actually believed other people, then you'd be like,
Why don't you believe me?
all right, now that's different.
Yeah.
That's different. So I think that's what it
Yeah,
comes down
it
to.
reminds me a little bit, when you were just talking about the science and being repeatable and stuff like that. Shane and I were just talking today how, these people talk about earth shine and all this stuff. And I've never been outside and just looked at the dirt and just seen it glowing or something, but apparently it just does that in make believe outer space, or even the planets, like we were talking about Saturn and Jupiter. These are supposed to be gas giants. And so supposedly light reflects
Reflective gas.
reflective
Reflective gas.
gas. Exactly. Like you said, these things have to be made of mirrors or something to reflect that kind of light. But we're told, no, these are gas giants. And like Jupiter is like one of the brightest things out there in the night sky. And it's just reflecting a reflective gas ball. I mean,
Right. Well, it's like full of storms, and I guess so. Like you think like how much reflection does a
right.
cloud have?
Yeah,
Like
it's so
probably not
insane.
that much,
And
but
It,
go ahead.
no, 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 go ahead.
And it has its own gases. Now, think about this. Gases have their own gravity, and Jupiter's supposedly made of hydrogen and helium, primarily hydrogen and helium. And it gets its own gravity, pulls itself together and holds itself there. And not only that, but it makes these pretty little patterns in it, these little stripes in the red
Hmm.
spot. How does gas know to organize itself that way in straight parallel lines? If you look at the stripes on
Right.
Jupiter, they're parallel, perfectly parallel all the time. They never change. They say they're cloud bands, whatever a cloud band is, made of gas. And the sunlight is traveling, well, from Jupiter's 400 million miles from Earth, supposedly. And you got the sunlight going that far to reach these gases, reflecting off of them and traveling 400 million miles back to your eyes, and it's still that bright.
Yeah. You literally almost have to turn your brain off to believe all that
You
stuff.
have
no, you do. Like I said, you just have to believe them because actually that was another thing that actually got me like really thinking because okay, so if if the ancients believed planets were wandering stars, they literally believe they're stars. They don't believe they're other places like the Earth.
yeah,
They believe they're wandering stars. If you look up what the gas giants are actually supposedly made of, they're made of hydrogen, helium, and have iron cores. Do you know what our sun
hydrogen.
is made out of?
What's
Yeah,
that?
Hydrogen, helium, and has an iron core. Okay, so what makes them different again? Why is the
bright,
sun a big
and
ball of
they're yeah.
fire? Also, how does a ball of fire burn when there's no oxygen? Like these kind of questions. Like, but like, so if it's the composition of those other planets are the same as the sun, and they're also very big, maybe they're similar. Because they're luminaries. They are made of. I mean, there is interesting something about like biblically, and even like I think ancient Egyptians believed that iron was from heaven.
What?
You ever heard that? Yeah, I want to say that King Tut had a knife or something like that, and it was made of iron, and they say it came from a
Mm.
meteorite. Like it literally came from heaven, and they shaped this knife out of there. And it's like there's thing about like even iron and clay.
Yeah.
Iron is like the symbolic of like the spiritual thing, and then you think about even Jesus coming with a rod of iron. Obviously, that's very
Grant.
specific that iron
Yeah,
was something
Hmm.
different. And so then you think about like I almost like made this connection. I'm not sure if it's how legit it is, but like there's this connection with obviously iron in the spiritual. Well, just think about what gas is.
yeah.
Isn't gas kind of like a spirit? So you have these beings you have these luminaries that are partially spirit and they're partially this tough metal. It's like is that kind of like what
Yeah, that's a
what
good.
angels are? Like they have this physicalness about them, but they're also spirit, so they could actually, you know, appear and do all the things that
That's
they
yeah.
do
I
as
never thought of
angels.
it that way. You know what else they claim comes from the sky or outer space? Gold.
Hmm.
Gold.
Right, right. So isn't it supposed to come from the
Yeah,
sun or
I
is
read some while
something like
back
that?
said it came from like some meteor storm a billion, billions of years ago. But it's just wild. But yeah, what else I thought of when you was talking about the spirit? Maybe they're gas and iron mixed together. Transformers. That's what they were. They were, yeah,
The
they
Transformers?
were alive.
Well, even they have like in the Transformers movies, they have like the like in obviously the Michael Bay ones, like one of the movies
Yeah.
called
And
Revenge of
where'd
the
they come
Fallen.
from?
Yeah, and it's just like yeah, obviously they come from this place and it's like their home is like messed up or something and they're cast down to earth and they're better than us and they've got
Yeah.
technology.
The
Sounds
Watchers. Yeah,
like the
Yeah.
Watchers. Again, like these stories are like I mean, when you first read Ecclesiastes, you really had just be let's all be honest. Nobody had clue what Solomon was
no,
saying when there's nothing new under the sun. Now we're starting to get the picture of like, wait a minute, all these stories continue to repeat. And the craziest thing is, I know you brought up Isaac Newton. What really is fascinating is when you find out why they started to accept the spinning ball around the sun model. All these guys like Isaac Newton and Copernicus, they're alchemists. So they didn't just. Do you think that they had a spaceship to go up and see all the things? Because they, if you didn't know, you would think that the only reason they figured out all this stuff is because, well, obviously we have the technology. They were stupid back then. But then you find out that the original people who believed in the heliocentric model believed in these sacred, like Egyptian and Babylonian texts that said very similar things, like the Kabbalah. So they had sacred texts that they drew upon to get their belief in the
hmm.
heavens or the cosmos. And so what you've really actually done as a Christian is accepting the authority of their
Yeah,
sacred text over
you're
yours.
you're 100%
So
right. Yeah, that's so true.
so as far as you said that they were alchemists, for those of us that are ignorant and don't really know what that is, you want to just touch on that just for a hair?
Well, I think what most people would know about alchemy was like they could turn like base metals into gold. It's basically like the early scientists were basically like just think about like the
Mm-hmm.
magicians in Egypt. I mean, it's kind of like that's the thing about the science and obviously the spiritual things that these days they want you to think that there's this separation. They tell you back in the dark ages that the church said all this math and all these scientists were worship the devil. They did.
Yeah,
they weren't lying because like if you hear like stories about like John Dee was like I think he was Queen Elizabeth's like astrologer and he was like literally like these people practice. I mean, if a lot of people probably would even know this and they wouldn't even argue this, that science is
hmm,
is a pursuit of some knowledge. Well, knowledge, gnosis. So think back to the Gnostics. So they're going about any means to get the knowledge they can. If you think back to way far ago, you think about the knowledge of good and evil in the Garden of Eden. The serpent. The serpent is what gives people knowledge, and it has not changed. So these people were going about like especially like John Dee. He was like one of the most famous scientists until he was like got into contacting angels, which obviously were fallen angels, demons, and doing divination and that's what these people all did. It's like it's funny, like even like the story of Isaac Newton. So how did he discover gravity? Well, of course he was sitting under a tree and an apple hit him on the head. Are you guys like children? Children, can I explain you this? No,
yeah,
he already knew things fell down. Like everybody knows things fall to the ground. That is not how he came up with the theory of gravity. The apple is
yeah.
symbolic of the tree.
Ah,
Once again, the tree of knowledge and good and evil. If you actually look up the old Apple logos, the very first ones, it's literally Isaac Newton sitting under the tree. So what did they change that logo to? An apple with a
Wow.
bite out of it. You guys understand what that means? Do you remember when they sold the first Apple computer and it was
Yeah.
$666.66? do you think these are coincidences? Like, no, that is what they're telling
Yeah.
you
Hmm.
without telling you. Like that is where this knowledge came from. It comes from another spiritual place. So alchemy,
Yeah.
yes, it's a form of witchcraft. That's straight up what it is.
You'll probably know this, but there's a quote I remember. I think it's in like that first Thor movie, and they're looking at the constellations, and he said something about magic and science, and science is just. Uh, do you know what I'm talking about? He says like magic.
Oh yeah. He said your ancestors called it magic, you call it science. Where I come from, they're one
Yes,
and the same.
I
And so the thunder god is telling her that they're both the same. It's kind of like that was the difference between science and magic for the most part is that if I can explain it to you, it's
Yeah.
science. If I don't, it's magic.
Basically.
wow, that's very
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
interesting.
but I think that again, like if you think about like so the science is all about numbers, the witchcraft is all about numerology. The witchcraft is all about signs and sigils, and then the science is about geometry. I mean, like you
Yeah.
guys like making the connections here. And again, it's like so a great example of this is like everyone like asking about CERN. What the heck are they doing at CERN? Why is there statues to Shiva there? If this is a
Right,
scientific place, why do they have Dark Matter Day there on
Yeah.
October 31st, Halloween? Samhain. Why is the site on where there's a temple to
right,
Apollyon? Like maybe
yeah,
things have not changed. Maybe these things are still like a little bit magical, and you don't know that. But I mean, it's like I think that's what you understand. Like again, like so you get to the NASA stuff. It's like, well, why don't I trust NASA? It's like because they're a bunch of occultists. Like, why do they name their rockets after Apollo and Saturn and Artemis and you know Gemini and every just think of a pagan god's name. It's like you wouldn't think they would name him after
No.
Moses, would they? Here's the Apostle
yeah.
Paul rocket. they
Yeah.
haven't they haven't
No,
done that yet, have they?
Yeah.
I
Speaking
wonder
of
why. Because they
Right,
don't
they worship
worship
different
our
gods
God.
than we do. They worship, I think, several different gods, probably plural, like you said, the Apollo, Artemis, Ra, Shiva. Um, Speaking of Shiva and CERN, did y'all see that video a while back where someone filmed them doing a full-on satanic ritual under that statue?
hmm,
Like it looks like
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Supposedly they were just acting, though. I think the
They're
people at CERN said, "Oh,
pranksters.
they weren't affiliated with us.
yeah,
They were
Pranksters.
in the
just
Yeah,
middle of
goofing
the night
off."
by themselves in robes, and one of them had a knife and
seem
everything,
pretty
and like
real.
pretended to sacrifice that person, or maybe really sacrificed them. I don't know. The video,
Yeah,
yeah,
Yeah, we have no idea. No, I mean it's just. I mean, I think that's the whole point. Is like that you really do find out. Even I was listening to a podcast the other day, and they was talking about that. Like literally, you could point to the Kabbalah and the way that their origins of the universe happened. I think it was like in the Kabbalah, the only creation was created this little atom or whatever, this little tiny particle, and then of course what happened with that expanded out and created everything else. And it's like this is the Kabbalah. It literally has. I mean, because obviously the Big Bang doesn't talk about wherever the matter came from that
right,
exploded. So like literally, it's like these scientific beliefs that obviously are not science whatsoever. The origins of the universe cannot be scientific because
right,
obviously that could not be tested. The origins of anything that's 60 million years old cannot be
no,
tested. You know, anything that's older
I
than
think
humans
that,
cannot be
yeah,
tested. And so like, but that's where, but they come, and that's what I'm saying. Like that these beliefs that they call science come from sacred texts, and they, like I said, if you believe them over your sacred text, well,
yeah,
obviously that's where your
hey,
faith is
do you
at.
think, I just thought about it, you think that's kind of a play on words with, you were talking about atoms, Atom, and then the first man was Adam, Adam.
Probably. I mean, I think that I've heard many people say that English is a kind of a cultic
Yeah,
coded language, and I think there's a reason why that back in the day people used to learn Latin, because Latin actually told you what these words meant, but they don't teach that anymore because they don't want you to know. That's why like your lawyer speaks Latin and you can't and you don't, and that's why you need a lawyer because you couldn't understand the law. It's like that's the only thing that the Freemasons have built is a bunch of lies. Like they've tried to code things, and so the laymen, the normal people cannot understand what they're saying. Everything's code, everything's in numbers and different phrases, and yeah, they that is what transcends all the time in the continents and all the things is the symbology of their language, and they
Yeah.
don't want us to know.
Yeah, I agree. I just thought that was kind of interesting. I just thought of it if, if they're both pronounced Adam, just Adam was the first man.
I mean, it is one of those things where I think that is like I think that's where like a lot of us like who make content, you get a thought like that and you just go look it up and you find out like like 9 out of 10 times you think that and you can look it up.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
that's
know.
true. Because it really is funny. Like that's what I'm saying. Like the hidden in plain sight, where it's like these things. Like some people, it's like, how did you ever figure that out? It's like it's because it's actually way more simple. Because it really is almost like you start to read their language a little bit, and like the patterns are just they're all there. It's actually really obvious, but like it's only because we haven't looked. Is the only reason
Yeah.
we didn't know.
You came up with a video a while back and you were talking about something and I was just thinking, how did you even think about that? It was something about like the computers and stuff like that. I can't remember what it is right now.
Was it about the AI and
Yes,
the
yes,
ayahuasca?
yes. I was like, where do you get this stuff, JT?
I think I think that I have a good memory when it comes to certain things. I
Hmm.
have like maybe a very good selective memory that I remember like for once I started making content. I guess I always like, and that's why I can remember things in movies.
Yeah.
Like certain things stick with me, and when I first started like making videos, or when I first started actually like learning about this stuff, I started watching Good Fight Ministries,
Oh yeah,
and
I
I,
know.
I learned a lot about like Aleister Crowley, a lot more than than anybody probably should ever know because it's like horrible man.
Right.
And they had an episode where well I think first before I did that I listened to Rogan every now and then, like not religiously or anything like that, but I listened to him and I really loved the lost civilization things, and I think that's why I got
Yes.
like we ended up making like Ancient Angels because I was fascinated with megaliths and stuff. So he had Graham Hancock on a lot, and that's what he spoke about was there was likely a lost civilization because that's the only reasonable explanation of why there's megaliths that we can't explain. Because if there wasn't a lost civilization, we'd have some kind of accounts for them, written accounts of how they did these things, but we don't. So there's obviously some kind of separation. Well, when he wasn't talking about megaliths, he was talking about drugs and he was talking about ayahuasca. And so like a lot of people have heard of that. There's this drug that's consumed like orally in the rainforest, and it's I think it has the drug component is DMT, and people like trip like
Yeah.
crazy,
Hmm.
and literally it's called the Vine of the Dead. The Vine of the Dead, and people like interact with the spirit world, and he's
Yeah.
claiming
Sure.
that like I think most people when they think of like hallucinogens, they're just imagining things, right? Like you're just
Right.
saying, oh, like I can't, I'm seeing all these weird things, but they're not real. Well, it just so happens when people take this, take this certain drug, they contact entities
And they
or
all have
entities.
the same exact
Well, I
experience,
don't know.
pretty
I don't know
much.
if I don't know if they all do, but
Yeah.
many encounters are very similar, where they're
Exactly.
encountering jesters and like
Oh
Yes.
heck no.
serpent
Yeah, I
beings and
ain't.
all
No.
kinds of weird stuff.
Yeah.
No. I mean, like,
Yeah.
no, not for me either. And so ayahuasca, but that I heard that term a lot, and obviously it comes up every now and then, like
Yeah.
celebrities going down there and doing it. And then
Hmm.
I was listening to Aleister Crowley, or I was watching the show from Good Fight, and I don't normally have the captions on, but they were on, and they were saying that Aleister Crowley was when he was channeling like the famous Satanist book, the Book of the Law. That's where that "Do What Thou Wilt" comes from.
Right. Right.
They said he was channeling an entity who he believed was Satan himself, and his name was Iowas, and I was like,
Yeah.
huh, that sounds kind of like ayahuasca. I think is what I saw. Like
Yeah.
that sounds sort of like, kind of like when you said Adam.
Yeah.
I was like ayahuasca, and I was like, that's weird. But the craziest thing, and I didn't put this in the video specifically, but like I knew like OS, everybody knows. But like the funny thing, what the caption said when he said, I had to say, wait, what did he just say? And I went back, and the caption said iOS, like
Yeah.
almost like the Apple operating system.
Yeah. Yeah. When
But
you
then I, of course,
said,
in the video,
yeah.
of course, in the video, I said AIOS because, like, in the same thing, it's like obviously phonetically it'd be said the same way.
Right.
AIOS
Right.
would be iOS, and so like, and then you had all these encounters with, the people, chatting with ChatGPT, and it, like this kid, was talking to it and it claimed it was a fallen angel, a Nephilim or whatever, and demon, and you're like, it makes sense in this sort of way. The more I think about it, obviously that's too coincidental for me, and I don't really believe in coincidences. So I
Right.
think that the main thing is like the enemy can get you a lot of different ways, and I think a lot of these things are about intention. So I think that like there are ways to, I think, like, I don't know what it would be like to cheat the system and get into the spiritual realm. Like, and I think that one of them is drugs. Obviously, I think anybody who's done drugs, I never really did much more than weed. But even I remember when I did it, even when I was, like I said, as like lukewarm guy, and I was like, maybe I had a guilty conscience. I felt very like uncomfortable. I felt every time I did it, like not every time, but like most of the time I did it, if I did too much, I was very paranoid. And now I'm wondering if I was like the veil thin. It's like obviously you're kind of like you're getting close to the spiritual things, and like thoughts are not your own.
Right.
And then, so obviously another way you could do that would be some kind of religious ritual, like some kind of, however, like obviously some kind of pagan thing, you could probably contact spirits that way. And then I think like through technology, I think you can too. I think that it's almost like that. I think a lot of people have made the connection that if like a Ouija board has no power in itself, right?
Right.
Idols have no power in themselves. And, the Bible mocks the idols. They can't move. They can't breathe. They can't walk.
Right.
They can't do anything. But I think that, like, again, as I was saying earlier about like recognizing the power of demons and the authority we give them ourselves, I think the intention of using ChatGPT to make decisions for you is a form of like using a Ouija board, through a higher technology, because obviously the Ouija board has no power, but when you're allowing it to move your hands, and then you are giving authority over to that demonic being in order to influence you.
Yeah.
And so I think that there's different routes to the same place, and obviously we know that the devil kind of runs this place, so they all kind of lead toward him.
Just with the technology and all that, the AI stuff that you were talking about, do you think it's kind of funny how that entity, that Aleister Crowley, one of them was also called Lamb, and then that sentient AI is Lambda? Like, is that
okay?
Is that kind of weird or no to you?
I mean, it could be. I mean, I think I thought you were going with that place that this thing looks just like what a gray alien.
Oh yeah,
like
yeah. No, it definitely does. Yeah.
I mean, obviously, there's something obviously connected about all of that stuff. The fact that Aleister Crowley says today we call them angels and demons. One day they're going to call them something else, and it's like obviously we're at that day where no, they're not angels or demons. They're aliens.
Yeah.
And so whatever term you're comfortable with, just like I said, that's why I liked ancient aliens. But the show is kind of dumb because it's like, oh well, these ancient people thought they were gods, but they wouldn't know what an alien was, so they would think it was a god. And you're like, would they know more about them than you because they actually supposedly interacted with them?
Yeah.
It's like, oh, because you have an iPhone, you know what an alien is. They wouldn't know one they met. Okay, what do you like? So what are you talking about? So you're just more comfortable with that term alien. It wasn't even like Richard Dawkins who said he kind of basically said it's possible panspermia might be a real thing, that aliens seeded us, So it's like, so we had a creator, just not that one
It's
in the Bible.
crazy.
Right.
It's like, okay, so like,
Yeah.
you know how stupid that sounds. Like, I don't believe in that. I don't believe in
No,
that God.
obviously.
Well, obviously you don't.
Yeah.
Like, we know that now. You confirm that, but now we also know that your position's
Yeah.
completely disingenuous because you just don't want to believe in that God.
Like they believe they brought us here from another planet, another world. You're willing to believe aliens brought us here from another world, light years from away, but you won't believe in the God of the Bible and that account of creation. That's some mental.
Well, you don't believe in the one
There
that
you
comes with
go.
accountability.
Yeah, you just hit the nail on the head. That's why. Yeah, that's good.
Mm-hmm.
That's exactly right.